Hey everyone, welcome to the channel during sprints. So this stream is going to be pretty casual because trying to kind of get the experience we are usually used to in terms of hanging out at sprints, but still hosting this on YouTube so people can kind of like drop in without having to like jump on the Google Meet or in the Slack channel, or like if you want to see it later too, then it's not trapped in just streaming it on a Google Hangout. So just wanted to put some of that together, so, but mostly going to be pretty chill weekend stream here. What I'm trying to show everybody here right now is specifically in terms of the Scipy sprints. And I actually had some slides for the sprint conversation earlier, the sprint kickoff, that I didn't use because it didn't seem cool. But just FYI that these exist if you want some inspo. I'm going to go through maybe a little bit of this too. But first I'm going to do a demo of what Prefect even is, because I think people might be joining the stream to figure out what we're even talking about. Do that first, then I'll talk a little bit about Scipy specifically, and then I'm going to do a live set up my development environment again, so that y'all can see how it goes. I'll show you where the docs are for it and stuff too. So let's just do it. Oh, feel free to message me in the YouTube chat. I have it on the other computer over here so that I can see that you're talking to me. I'll put it like more in front. So just let me know if you have any questions while I'm going. I'm gonna glance over there, and feel free to ask me anything, and I'll try and answer. Okay, so demo-wise, what we're looking at right here is kind of the end goal of the demo, which is that this is the UI for our open source orchestration layer for workflows, right? So the idea of Prefect in general is that you have work. The kind of the easiest way to look at it is like, right, you have flow charts basically of stuff that you want to do, but each of these tasks is some sort of program, probably written in Python, some function or some class or a couple of different things in Python that you want to do. So the whole deal of Prefect is to have a Python API to describe how they're dependent to each other, how they pass data down to each other, where they should execute, when they should execute, callbacks when things go wrong, if things are failed, or when things change states to do something specific. So being able to annotate all of that stuff on it using our API, so you don't have to roll all your own stuff for that. So that's the general gist. This is kind of like the end goal in terms of lots of the Prefect nice stuff that you can build up to get to. And I have some other demos that go in more detail, or also go in more detail and also layer on more piece by piece. And here I'm kind of just going to show you one all at once so you can see everything. And then if you do want to dig into those other videos, I'll walk you through it. There's plenty of docs about it too. And then we can also chat about it on the Meet or on the Scipy Slack too. So don't be shy about that. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to kind of like throw it all at you really quick, and then you can just see what it's about. So how did I get this that has probably at this point just looks like it has a lot of green on it, but what happened is that I executed work that is composed of these tasks that add some numbers together, right? It's not like super exciting, but that add some numbers together. And so I did that, and then this is reporting to me that successfully happened, and that's where we got to, right? So I have this situation back here. Right, I have my terminal, which has 4 tabs. You can see the little pink bar in the bottom. This one called registration, this one called server, this one called agent, and this one called desk executor. So the situation here is that I have a flow written using the Prefect API. So mine is called Hello World. And this is all looks like just general Python, but the important parts is that there's code in here that is like tasks that Python code that I actually want to run. Here's also some Python code that I actually want to run. This is written as a function, whereas up here, this is written as a run method on a class. And these are subclassing in this case here, or being decorated. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Being decorated in this case here with, sorry, apparently I can't talk and type at the same time, with, here we go, and decorated, in this case here, with stuff that we got from Prefect. So that's the exciting part that's going on up here. And then the next layer, once you've described the type of work that you want to do, the type of work that you want to do in Python or whatever, you create a flow. Here is the most classic way that we do that with this context manager to create a flow, but there's some other API ways to do that. And then we can specify that these tasks have dependencies with each other. In this case, I'm using our functional API, which means that it looks just like I'm calling these tasks as functions, and I'm just passing. You can see that this first line here calls sleepy task, which is a function definition that I made and annotated with task above. And I'm assigning the variable that I get back from that to first int, and that gets passed as an argument to this next task, which is my add task from the very top of this file. So just the fact that I've passed the output of one task as a argument to the next task establishes this type of edge here, that these are a dependency between each other. So kind of the exciting part of Prefect is that has this nice API, this nice functional API. There's some other ways to do it that's more lower level nitty gritty, but also then you get more power. But in this case, if you have kind of the simple case of just like pass this or these things from multiple functions even into one task, then this API can handle that for you. And then once you've established some flow code here in this context manager that establishes effectively the structure of how your tasks should run and how they should be dependent on each other, I've got, again, I'm throwing everything at you at once just to show you how it all goes together. But what you do with your flow is that you can associate metadata with it about how it should run. This is called a flow's environment, so like how it should actually execute. So in my case, I want to execute this flow whenever I want it to run to a Dask executor, which I have running locally in my third tab here. So that's the combination of instantiating this Dask executor with my local address to my Dask executor and creating this local environment object, which gets attached to my flow object. And then the next step here is this last thing called flow.register, which is going to register this flow to a backend, to a Prefect backend like this one. So segue into that let's get rid of all my mistakes. Segue into that in this second tab here called server, right? I have all this crazy output, which this is a locally running instance of Prefect server, which is what is actually serving this UI. There's actually a couple levels of infrastructure that's going on here. You can see that there's all this output over here indicating individual services, GraphQL, scheduler, we've got UI, here's Apollo. So these are all names of services that are used to stand up this UI and this backend basically. This is all running in Docker right now locally on my computer. And this is a open source version of a hosted, hosted platform called Prefect Cloud that does the same thing, but this is the self-hosted version. So this one I'm just running locally on my computer. And that registration step that I did at the very end of that Python file that I showed you before, the effect of that is, if I go sort of back to my dashboard, is to associate this flow, in my case, this flow listing right here in this record on this UI is actually that flow that I showed you in the Python file, associate it with this backend. And again, I keep pointing at this UI like this is the backend, but it's this whole infrastructure going on back here. So that's the point of flow.register. And then you have a way through this UI to interact with this flow, look at its metadata, see how it's run in the past, and also actually execute it. So we have these like rocket ship buttons, right? So you can run your flow right here from the UI. And I'm going to do that in just a second, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about the architecture first. But the whole idea here is that now this orchestration layer, which is most easily identified by its UI, is what we can take a look at to see how this flow has run in the past and check on it, and also get it kicked off too. So quick segue into some architecture stuff of all the pieces that are going together here. That's a little too close, but that's a little too far. It's not too bad. I have some other examples of other architecture here, but this is about the best example of what we're doing right now, which we just did this step, right, where we registered a flow from some Python context to, in my case, it's my local version of Prefect server, but this diagram is showing Prefect Cloud. I mentioned that's our hosted kind. And what I'm going to show you all now is that this left side of this diagram is once we've registered to this backend, we could arbitrarily kick off this flow at any time. So over here on this left side is the stuff that actually runs that flow, right? So this registration step is just to let your orchestration layer know that this flow exists and that you could interact with it in the UI. And then on this side, this is the thing that actually runs everything. So you can see that there's this thing called agent, this environment, we set that up in our flow, and this executor. So regarding agent and executor in this diagram here, right, these two things, I have these two other tabs running locally for me. So here I have this agent, which I'll explain in a second. And then here I have a Dask executor. I ran a distributed Dask scheduler and then two Dask workers. And you see some output from Prefect here actually because I ran this before to like make sure my demo was all okay. But we'll see this all running again now. So let me press the run button over here. I'll even press quick run. And this is a UI vision picture of this specific flow run, and you can see some logs started running over here, some stuff's moving on the UI, because the effect of pressing run here somehow, I'll explain in a second, somehow told my computer to actually run this, this flow that I registered to this backend. So what actually happened is my agent here, this long running Python process here, is constantly polling this backend to see is there any flows that I should be running. And if I press quick run again for my flow, we'll see some logs show up after 15.12.05. That is evidence that this agent is grabbing the, here we go, 15.12.51, is grabbing some stuff from this, from things that changed in this UI, right? So that's the connection here. This agent is what is basically the middleman between my backend over here and my Dask executor over here. So my agent and my Dask executor can talk to each other. My agent and my server backend can talk to each other. And that is the full connection here, right, in terms of these arrows pointing in of things that, and this arrow going out from this agent, of things that are talking to each other to make all of this work. So this all may seem kind of complicated because I'm all on my local computer, but the reason I'm showing you this architecture instead of some of our more simple architectures, which again you can see in some of the other video tutorials that build up instead of just like throw it all at you at the end. But the exciting part is that since this is all kind of like split up, you can run this distributed. So you can scale it out as much as you want. So really we have people who are running their agents distributed in like GCP using like GKE, or in AWS using Fargate. Same thing with their executors. They're running Dask clusters wherever, all over the place. They're running adaptive Dask clusters that will scale up or scale down depending on their needs. They'll use the Dask Kubernetes project, for example, which will scale up workers, will only like instantiate workers when work actually exists and then tear them down afterwards. So you can get a lot of auto scaling for free, basically, once you get the tiddly bits of setting this up in the architecture that we've set up. Now everything can run in different places, and that's really like the super powerful thing at the end. So the whole idea is that, and again, we skimmed over all of this, but you can work on your flows in just pure Python with a nice Python API, and you can even run them locally, at least in terms of sample data too. Depends how big your computer is, right? But you can also use the same API to get stuff totally scaled up. So that's the demo, right? The really quick and dirty demo. Let's press run again for fun. Who's with me? Quick run, right? So we can get that going. Let's get another one scheduled just for fun. But anyways, so that's what's going on back here. So if you are interested in working with or on Prefect today or tomorrow during Scipy or in your life, but we can just start with at Scipy. Here's a couple tips of how we're kind of going to work together, and just what you might be interested in as a Scipy attendee. So the short list here I've got on the right side of this slide is what I think people might be interested in doing based on like Scipy life. So especially if you're new to Prefect, it might be useful to try and use it to transform some workflows that you may already know about, maybe some like NLP pipeline that you're working on or some bioinformatics pipeline that you're working on. You're going to find out that I'm like secretly super interested in all the bioinformatics people who might be here at Scipy because I know y'all here. So and that was my undergrad, so I'm just like kind of nerdy about it. But I definitely think that an easy first win for people is to try and translate stuff that y'all already do every day, maybe Jupyter notebooks or Python scripts that you have or have in mind, and try and write them in Prefect using the Prefect Python annotations to set up the workflow instead of having, functions calling functions in whatever your Jupyter notebook is. Try and wrap that around with Prefect and then start to see the benefits of being able to take advantage of the Prefect API through all these different layers, eventually ending up with like a super crazy distributed, scalable, monitorable, alertable thing, right? So that'd be cool. And in particular, we don't have a ton of scientific demos or machine learning demos in our docs right now. So that's also why this is just like a win-win situation, I think, between the two of us. Kind of a riff on that is another place that we want to start putting our tutorials. Right now we have basically all of our tutorials on our docs, and you can just, like copy and paste them or something. But it would be way cooler, right? I mean, we do have this cool copy button, but it would be cooler if they were in Binder, right? And could be run interactively. And, the cool dream too would be if we could get server running in a binder so that you could like experience all of this without having to have all of these things running that I just showed you in this demo, right? Like this is like daily life for me because I'm doing demos a lot, but the average person probably doesn't want to do all that work, right? Or not work, but like setup before you even get to experience the thrill. So that would be awesome. And I actually haven't used Binder before, though I get the sense it's basically just Jupyter notebooks. I don't know, don't quote me. But let's try working on that. If you are a Binder pal, then let's be pals. And then the other thing I want to recommend is task library integrations. And, oops, I don't know why we skipped, sorry. Task library integrations. So one of the other nice things about Prefect is that we have this whole list of tasks in what we call our task library that can do various things that we think are kind of standard things that people might want to put in a workflow. So here's a bunch of different things exposing AWS APIs for Lambda or for S3. Or here's like a DBT task, or one that I was working on recently. If anybody has experience with, I'd love to chat a Great Expectations task to run a Great Expectations checkpoint, which does assertions on your data to make sure that all your data is still in certain thresholds. GitHub, MySQL, Kubernetes, Postgres, Snowflake, blah, 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 right? We have a bunch of stuff in here. And I would like to see more stuff in here is the story. So definitely consider that. I have a whole guide and video tutorial that I did about this too. So that's another reason why it's a good segue if you're new to Prefect in particular. So feel free to hit me up about that. You can find it on the YouTube channel for sure. But I guess I can just show you. This is so meta because like I'm live right now and I'm showing you this YouTube, right? But in here, this live stream using and contributing to the task library, that's the one that you're gonna wanna take a look at. There's a link to a documentation guide, like a companion written guide as well in there. So you can definitely take a look at that. And so, kind of like big brain thing I want to get working on, especially with the Scipy community, is to brainstorm and maybe actually work on, but I feel like we really need to pin down some of the ideas in the first place. how and if we should do some pipeline conversions to Prefect. So for example, if you write a scikit learn pipeline, like the pipeline object, should we, like, what is the quote? Your scientist asks if we could instead of if we should. I'm butchering. This is like a Jurassic Park quote, but I'm curious what y'all's opinions are regarding if it would be useful, especially now that you've seen a little bit about Prefect. Is it useful to take scikit pipelines or whatever your most used library, if it has some sort of architecture to describe pipelines? Should we make a thing that can like turn those into Prefect pipelines somehow? I don't know. But that's a cool food for thought, and I would love to get people's opinions about that. And then as always, we have bugs and backlog issues, right? So we have things annotated with good first issue as well. I think some of those are more like in the weeds of Prefect, but you should definitely take a look if you're interested in those, especially bugs. Some of them have a lot to do with specific deployment situations, so that's why I didn't like 100% think it was necessarily like Scipy focused. But if you're interested, definitely take a look, and I'm totally free to answer questions about that. I see Jeremiah's in the chat. Hey, Jeremiah. Okay, and then I mentioned some of this in the Slack, but I'm going to hang out in the Google Meet whenever we need to do screen shares directly. But Slack basically for everything else, don't be shy about pinging me. It's a lot of hours for this, and I may not be at my desk the whole time, but I'll definitely be available on Slack. And then, I'm live now, and I'm going to be live tomorrow just to show you more steps in the process here of contributing to Prefect. So we're going to do this fresh dev install right after this, but then tomorrow I'm going to talk more about our tests and static checks. So that a lot of people sometimes get stuck at the next step when they're opening their PR because there's like a lot of GitHub checks and they're like, whoa, what's going on? So we'll talk about that. If you experience that at all between now and then, don't worry, we're going to talk about it and how to open a PR. And we have a bunch of content. I already mentioned about the YouTube channel with a bunch of tutorials and how-to videos. We have our own Slack, and I'll drop the link in to the Scipy Slack. So this is maybe more useful after Scipy to keep in touch, but definitely drop in there, and there's a ton of people talking about all sorts of stuff in there all the time, including all the Prefect folk. So we're all there hanging out, supporting people too. And then we do have a page in our docs that's specifically for sprints, which is trying to be like the one-stop shop for here's all the links to link out to all the random docs all over the place, and to the GitHub issues and to specific labels, etc., to specific pins. So this is supposed to be kind of your one-stop shop. You're new to Prefect sprints, where is everything? You can actually come to this page and get pretty much everything that you need to know without kind of digging around everywhere. So this is also a really useful thing too, which is a nice segue because I'm going to now talk about starting your development environment, if everybody's ready for that. So, as mentioned here, it kind of depends what type of issue you want to tackle. In general, there's these two categories. If you want to work on docs, we have a development environment for the docs. You see how beautiful these beautiful docs are? That's because, well, I don't know because, but part of why is because these are generated with ViewPress. So there's some special docs development instructions if you actually want to be like making major changes to the docs. And then our main development instructions is if you want to actually be working on Prefect, if you want an editable version of Prefect. So that's what we're going to do the example for. And it's possible that depending what you're working on, especially if you're working on the task library, like if you're trying to pull in an integration with something else into Prefect, you might need to install extra dependencies than what is available once you've done the vanilla kind of development environment install. Because, if you're working on like a Neo4j task, we need the bindings for the Python bindings for Neo4j, which doesn't already come as a dependency of Prefect because we've never had a Neo4j task, library task or anything before, integration before. So that's the type of situation I'm mostly talking about for that. So definitely reach out if you need to diagnose your development environment, if the general directions aren't enough, and that's one thing that you might want to be on the lookout. If you're working on the task library, you probably need to get some more dependencies in. So shall we do it? Let's do it. All right, so to install Prefect for development, you should create an editable install of Prefect's master branch, including all the development dependencies. So this is the situation. right? And that's, let's get out of some of this, right? Let's kill some of these windows so I can get myself going. Get rid of all that, stop our agent, stop our server, exit out of here, just clean things up a little bit, right? Okay, so let's do dev environment, right? I like to segue into what I'm actually doing by changing my labels of my tabs here. Okay, so you can see probably for the people who are used to Python development, you may be very comfortable with seeing stuff like this. This little prompt in my terminal is telling me that I am in my case, a Conda environment called Prefect. So I'm using Conda as a virtual environment system. You could use virtual env, you could use poetry, you could use pipenv. You know, the Python environment wars continue raging, but I'm using Conda. So right now I'm in this Conda environment called Prefect, and what I'm going to do is actually get out of that because I'm going to create a new Conda environment and then install all of this stuff. So Conda create, let's see, I already have a lot of copies of this Prefect in here, so let's call this one scipy dev env, right? Let's do that. So depending on your package manager, the exact way that you start a environment varies, of course, but this is probably a lot of scipy people are using Conda. Is that cool? I don't know. I am using it. So hopefully you like it too. So I just created this empty environment basically, and I'm going to activate it. Activate scipy dev env. So it's also kind of telling me, to activate this environment, do this, to deactivate this. I know this because I use Conda a lot, but just FYI to those who don't. And so I'm going to do this, and then this prompt is going to change because now I'm going to be inside the virtual environment for scipy dev env. So now I've gotten myself sort of situated that I'm ready to do this process. So I also have many copies of Prefect installed, but by installed I mean cloned, but why don't we just get another one, right? So let me actually get out in my desktop. I'm going to make a new directory called scipy dev prefect, just so I can kind of keep myself organized. And I'm gonna do this, right? First step, clone the repo. We can go look at the repo too. prefect.hq/prefect. Type this on the daily. So here is the repo, right? There's a README here too with plenty of more information. But this is, exactly the same thing. You can use SSH or HTTPS depending on how you normally clone stuff, or if you don't normally clone stuff one way or the other. I guess I recommend HTTPS if you're a beginner, right? That's this flip, just so you don't have to set up your SSH keys. But where's my terminal? Here we go. So I'm going to clone this and get yet another copy of Prefect on my computer. Someday I'll clean them up, but not today. Okay, so in here, now I have this directory called Prefect. We can cd in here and see all of these files, same files as back here, right? Very exciting. So let's get back to our directions. So I already did this step. I cd'd into Prefect. Then here's the next step. We're going to pip install in editable mode -e, and then this is syntax for pip to install this period here is for current directory. So that's why we cd'd into Prefect. It's going to find the setup.py in this directory. And then this is a annotation to look for all the dev extras. There's a key in our setup.py for the things that you need for dev, and this is going to install all of that too. So here I am, pip install -e, and then we need these quote marks too to help with our escaping situation with these scary brackets, right? But this, I think I did it right, it is the same as this. And since I'm in my Prefect directory, this is going to install Prefect for me. So, there's, okay, I have the wrong version of Python. I'm using Python 2.7. Okay, so this is a good point. So let me deactivate remove, I think it is. Drat, conda env remove. Oh, I think it's name, scipy dev. I'm deleting the conda environment I made because I'm going to recreate it with the right version of Python. So my Anaconda conda situation is using Python 2.7 by default. How embarrassing. But Prefect needs Python 3.6 or higher. So when I create my conda environment, conda create, I believe it's dash p, dash py, 3 dash. So I'm like, all of these memories are like flying through my mind of what this is. Let's see if help will tell us. Always a good question. I need to tell it which Python I want to use, which I think is like dash py, and then the number. And I feel like I also am remembering, I don't think it's usually in help because then I usually go look it up. I'm just reliving my life all over again. Let's do it. Conda create dash pi 3 point. Let's do 8. Name scipy dev and yeah. I want, is it Python? Oops. We're really gonna figure it out somehow. I really feel like it's one of these. Let's go look it up, right? Conda docs Python version. Conda documentation. Seems to look like I clicked on this before. Ah, okay. To create a new environment, here it is. Let's learn this all over again. Create the new environment, blah, 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 in your terminal window, conda create dash n pi, oh, that's the name. Not exciting. Okay, I see. There's no dashes. It's just Python equals blah, blah, blah. This is some sort of metadata thing. Okay, so we're not too far off. We just need it to look like this. Python equals something like that. Let's see if that works. Yay! Okay, let's figure out what Python we're into. Stuff. We can actually scroll up because I bet it's going to tell me. Oh, yeah, it's right here that it's going to go get Python 3.8. Yay! Okay, let's do that. Yeah, so make sure that you're using the right version of Python, like I didn't. But then we can get back in here and pip install, do the same thing. And it should be happier. Cool. So there's all of these dependencies are going to get installed because these are all the either just straight up Prefect dependencies or the dependencies because we put that dev annotation in there. So la la la, fun doing this. Let's get back to these docs. Gonna take a little bit, depends. Potentially in your internet connection too. But yeah, once we've done this, then we will have Prefect in editable mode. Oops. So we can sort of pip freeze in here, and I should see. Sorry, I gotta get my scrollies going. This is this environment's version of Prefect. It's the editable install of my local version of Prefect. This is the commit that I'm at. So this is what's going on here. So I can make changes to my version of Prefect and see them if I run Prefect stuff in here. So we can even do something from that perspective just to double check. Okay, so I'm using VS Code, and the first step is to make sure I open the right version of Prefect because, as mentioned, I have a lot of them. So let's find mine. Desktop scipy dev. This is the one that we want. This is the one that I'm running with, right? Okay, so then, we could get in a Python, import Prefect. Something like this happens. So maybe let's throw something in a random init.py file that will print out to us or something, and then we can just prove to ourselves that it's talking to us. So let's get in here. you know, maybe throw in a print, hello Scipy. Get out of here. Try again. Yay! Okay, right? So it's saying hey to us. Hey. And that's the skinny. So this is how we're gonna set everything up in terms of development. So now, whenever we're using the Python executable in this environment, it's going to be using the prefect, the editable prefect here. You can make whatever changes you want, and then it will run over here. One easy gotcha, if you don't pip install IPython in here, it's not the same one, okay? So I have made this mistake so many times, so you can actually see a tip, because my IPython that's on my path is connected to 3.7, but my Python that I know is for this environment is in 3.8. So, you know, if we do this, I wouldn't expect it to say hi to me because it's actually like totally on a different path. It has different pip site packages, different pip dependencies. So I get confused all the time for that. I feel like Scipy people probably use IPython a lot too, or at least Jupyter Notebooks. So I wanted to say that in particular. Okay, so you know that's the TLDR on how to set up the development environment. If for some reason you are making changes to server specifically. So I guess I shut mine down, but this is the ghost of the UI that we were reading before, that we were looking at before. If you are making changes to server, then you probably want to install the server dependencies. So those exist too. There's a README about them on the repo. So I don't think anyone's necessarily going to be doing that, but just FYI that exists too. So let me just click into it really quick so you can see. You click into server, there is a README with some special development environment information, which is basically to go into a further subdirectory and install from there. And then there's a different CLI for it entirely. Cool. All right, so that's the gist. That's what I wanted to get over. Demo, what are we doing at Scipy, and development environment. So I think that's pretty much everything. Again, I'm going to be hanging out around town, right? I'll be in Slack for sure, and then I'll hang out in the Google Meet. And then if you want to ping me, feel free to ping me. I'll be back on YouTube tomorrow. And on top of everything else, you can always come to the Prefect Slack if you want to continue working on stuff or work on stuff later. So definitely check us out there. And other than that, I think that's everything I wanted to get across today. So hope to hang out with you this weekend or in the future. And I will see y'all later. Bye, people.